High beyond the reach of mortal travelers, in the white silence of the northern Himalayas, there is said to lie a kingdom untouched by decay. Hidden behind walls of cloud and ice, it is neither on the maps of emperors nor in the annals of explorers. And yet, it has endured for millennia within the imaginations of mystics, pilgrims, and poets. The Tibetans call it Shambhala, the land of bliss, the source of peace. To speak of Shambhala is to enter a geography that does not belong solely to the earth. For the mountains and rivers of that place are drawn as much from the spirit as from stone. It is a kingdom of radiant order, said to shimmer beyond the farthest snow range, where the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, endures in its purest form, while the rest of the world succumbs to the corrosion of time. To the devotee kneeling in a smoke-filled shrine, the name itself carries weight, as if syllables could open a door. Monks reciting the Kalachakra Tantra speak of Shambhala with a steady certainty, not as legend, but as living promise. The air of their mountain monasteries seems filled with the hum of that unseen realm, a whisper that civilization has not been abandoned, that beyond the summits there is a light burning still. In this faith, Shambhala is not fantasy. It is the mirror of what should be, the archetype of a world ruled by wisdom rather than appetite. According to the old scriptures, Shambhala lies somewhere to the north of the river Sita, beyond the land of the great snow mountains, in a region the sun touches differently. Travelers who have heard the tale claim that the way to it cannot be found by compass or caravan. One may wander for years among the passes of Kham or Ladakh and never see its gates, for its presence reveals itself not to the eye but to the purity of heart. The legends say that the mountains surrounding it are impassable to the uninitiated, guarded by elemental forces that turn back the unworthy. Yet for those who have cultivated the vision of inner stillness, the mists part, and the hidden valley opens like a lotus unfolding. Descriptions of Shambhala vary across centuries, but they share a tone of awe. Some Tibetan chronicles portray it as a valley of incomparable beauty, encircled by snow peaks that blaze with perpetual light. Within this ring of mountains lies a vast plain where rivers of turquoise water wind through gardens and forests. At the center rises Kalapa, the capital, a city of golden roofs, where the palace of the Rigden kings stands like a jewel upon the world's crown. There it is said, the Dharma is studied not by scholars bound to parchment, but by men and women who have realized the teaching in every act of their lives. Even the children of Shambhala are born with the knowledge of compassion, and the animals live without fear. The seasons turn in harmony. There is no famine, no disease, no war. It is a kingdom where the spiritual and temporal powers are one, where the ruler is an enlightened being, and governance itself is a form of meditation. In Tibetan temples, one sometimes sees wall paintings of Shambhala, concentric circles enclosing palaces, temples, and gardens, their geometry precise and luminous. These are not mere illustrations, but mandalas, sacred diagrams meant to convey the invisible architecture of reality. To gaze upon them is to participate in the mystery they represent. The innermost circle, the citadel of Kalapa, corresponds to the heart of wisdom. Around it, the 8 petals of the lotus unfold into the directions of the world, each bearing a symbol of virtue. When the practitioner contemplates this image, he or she is not simply imagining a faraway land, but entering a spiritual state. The awareness of Shambhala as a realm within. For those steeped in the Kalachakra teachings, the boundaries between physical and spiritual geography blur. They say that Shambhala occupies both the outer world and the inner mind. The outer Shambhala may be hidden in the far north, but the inner Shambhala lies latent in every being, a potential for enlightenment waiting to be uncovered. Just as a mirror reflects light when its dust is wiped away, so the heart reveals Shambhala when ignorance is cleared. The kingdom is thus both myth and method, a way to speak of the perfection that is already present beneath the imperfections of the visible world. The origins of the tale, however, stretch far back into the mists of Indian antiquity. Long before Tibet had embraced the teachings of the Buddha, the name Shambhala appeared in Sanskrit text as the birthplace of the final avatar of Vishnu. Kalki, the radiant horseman who would come at the end of the Dark Age to renew the world. In that earlier vision, Shambhala was no hidden realm but a city of kings, destined to produce the savior who would restore righteousness when all virtue had fled the earth. When the Kalachakra Tantra emerged in India around the 10th century, it wove this ancient Hindu prophecy into the Buddhist fabric, transforming Kalki from a divine warrior into an enlightened monarch, the last in a lineage of 25 kings who rule Shambhala. Thus, the myth bridged two civilizations, preserving the apocalyptic yearning of one faith and the meditative discipline of another. Through Tibet, the legend found its most fertile ground. The high plateaus, with their harsh winds and unending horizons, seemed a natural gateway to other worlds. Pilgrims crossing those wastes could easily imagine a paradise concealed among the peaks, a sanctuary where the storms of the age could not reach. The Tibetan imagination, rich in visions of hidden lands, Beul, readily adopted Shambhala as the supreme Beul, the refuge of refuges. As monks carried the Kalachakra Tantra from India into the monasteries of Lhasa and Sang, Shambhala ceased to be a distant rumor and became a promise, a destiny inscribed in prophecy. The Tibetans were not content to leave Shambhala vague. They mapped it with care, describing its dimensions, its climate, its flora, even the daily life of its citizens. As the centuries turned and the monasteries of northern India fell to the changing tides of empire and invasion, the spiritual seeds carried in the Kalachakra Tantra began to scatter toward the Himalayas. The physical kingdom of Shambhala may never have been mapped, but the idea of it was carried by monks, traders, and mystics, a current of luminous doctrine flowing northward into Tibet. If Shambhala was a place of wonder, it was also a kingdom of purpose. Its beauty, say the scriptures, is not ornamental but symbolic. Each river, palace, and mountain bears meaning. Each act of its people reflects a principle of Dharma. The land is shaped according to sacred geometry, mountains rising in 8 directions like the petals of a lotus, rivers flowing from the snowy rim toward the jeweled heart at Kalapa, where the Rigden kings sit upon thrones of crystal and gold. This symmetry is the mirror of the mind's awakened order. Just as the mandala arranges the cosmos around a center of stillness, so Shambhala stands as the perfected mandala of the world. The great chronicles describe the capital, Kalapa, as a city of serene splendor. Its streets are paved with lapis lazuli. Its roofs gleam like morning sunlight upon dew. In the central palace stands a vast temple dedicated to the Wheel of Time, the Kalachakra, whose great dome is said to turn with the movement of the heavens. Around it dwell the families of yogins and scholars, artisans and healers, each performing their craft as an offering. There is no distinction between labor and worship. The potter's shaping of clay is as holy as the monk's recitation of mantras, for both are acts of mindfulness. The air carries the fragrance of sandalwood and wild blossoms, and a soft light not born of sun or fire, pervades every corner. Time flows differently there, some say. Slowly, like a calm river that never loses its course. At the heart of the city sits the throne of the Rigden kings, carved from a single block of translucent quartz. Upon it, the king rules not by decree, but by presence. Each Rigden, or Kalki, embodies the unity of spiritual and temporal authority. In him, wisdom and power are reconciled, the sword of action balanced by the jewel of insight. He governs not through conquest, but through the radiance of enlightenment. For the true ruler of Shambhala conquers only ignorance. Beneath his guidance, even the elements obey their natural harmony. The winds are gentle, the rains fall in due season, and the crops grow in abundance without toil. The kings of Shambhala are not mortal dynasts, but enlightened emanations, appearing age after age to preserve the Dharma's continuity. Tibetan chronicles speak reverently of the lineage of these kings. The first ruler, Suchandra, was a disciple of the historical Buddha himself. When the Buddha preached the Kalachakra Tantra upon the plains of India, Suchandra came forth, a monarch weary of the contradictions between worldly duties and spiritual vows. Bowing before the teacher, he asked how a layman might follow the path of enlightenment without renouncing the world. The Buddha, perceiving his sincerity, taught him the Tantra of the Wheel of Time, a doctrine that unites the rhythm of the cosmos with the practice of liberation. Suchandra received the transmission, returned to his northern realm, and there established Shambhala as a kingdom where every citizen could live as a yogin within society itself. Under Suchandra's rule and that of the 7 Dharmarajas who followed him, the people of Shambhala learned to harmonize spiritual realization with daily life. Each household became a monastery without walls, each act a form of meditation. The chronicles say that under their reign, illness and poverty vanished. For the mind's impurities, the roots of all suffering, were cleansed. The very soil of the land responded to their virtue, yielding golden harvests and clear waters. The wind carried mantras, the rain fell as nectar. There was no fear of death, for all knew that life and death were but phases of the same wheel of time. After the 7 Dharmarajas came the 25 Kalki kings, each an emanation of wisdom. The first, Manjushri Kirti, reorganized the spiritual life of the realm. He gathered all its diverse traditions into one great synthesis, the way of the Vajra family, teaching that all paths lead toward the single truth of enlightenment. His son Pundaraka, the second Kalki, composed the Vimala Prabha, the stainless light, a commentary that illuminated the Tantra's hidden meanings. These works became the cornerstone of the Kalachakra system, ensuring that the wisdom of Shambhala would never fade. Each Kalki after them upheld the Dharma. Their reigns measured not in years, but in cycles of spiritual accomplishment. They are said to dwell even now, continuing their lineage through the invisible currents of time, unseen by ordinary eyes. And yet prophecy declares that the final king, Raudra Chakran, the wrathful wheel-turner, will one day reveal himself when the world stands at the brink of darkness. Then, from the gates of Kalapa, he will lead an army of the just against the forces of chaos, riding upon a white horse that blazes with light. He will restore balance to the earth, ushering in a new age of harmony. Thus, Shambhala is not only the memory of a golden past, but the promise of a golden future. Such eschatological visions gave the legend its enduring vitality. For the Tibetans, living on the harsh edges of civilization, Shambhala represented the ultimate assurance that the Dharma would not perish, that goodness had a hidden refuge awaiting its time to return. When monks recited the prophecies of the final war, they did so not with fear, but with faith. The apocalypse of Shambhala is not destruction, but renewal, the turning of the wheel once more toward light. In its imagery, the armies of Shambhala, clad in armor of compassion, wield no ordinary weapons. Their swords are wisdom, their banners are truth. The battle they fight is within and without, against the ignorance that clouds the human heart and the delusions that shatter societies. There are those among the learned lamas who teach that this battle has already begun, though unseen. Every act of kindness, every moment of insight, they say, is a stroke struck for Shambhala. The kingdom advances not by conquest, but by awakening in the hearts of beings. When enough minds are purified, the veils will lift and the hidden land will manifest in the open world. Thus the myth turns inward again. Shambhala is not found, but revealed when the eyes of wisdom open. For centuries, seekers and sages debated whether Shambhala existed in physical space or only in the subtle dimension of meditation. The great scholar Tsongkhapa, founder of the Gelug school, spoke cautiously of it as a pure realm accessible only through yogic realization. Others, like the Nyingma treasure finders or Tertons, hinted that it might be located in some northern valley, perhaps beyond the Pamirs, or between the Altai and the Gobi. Each map of the spirit had its echo in maps of the world. In the 17th and 18th centuries, Mongol Khans and Russian explorers even sent expeditions in search of Shambhala, convinced that the Tibetans guarded knowledge of a literal utopia somewhere beyond their northern frontier. Yet the monks of Lhasa smiled at such efforts. "You may cross 1,000 mountains," they said, "and never find it. But purify one thought, and it is already beneath your feet." In this tension between myth and geography lies the genius of the Shambhala story. It invites both belief and introspection, drawing the imagination outward while leading the spirit inward. It satisfies the hunger for a hidden paradise and the yearning for self-transcendence. Its mountains are both real and symbolic. Its rivers flow through the heart as much as through the Himalayas. That dual nature allowed Shambhala to survive the passing of empires. Kingdoms fell, doctrines divided, but Shambhala remained, shimmering at the edge of thought, a constant ideal of the possible world. As Tibet entered the modern age, cut by trade routes and shadowed by empire, the image of Shambhala acquired new poignancy. Pilgrims still whispered of the secret valley. Lamas still taught that its king awaited the appointed time. To the faithful, the prophecy became not a distant event, but a living metaphor. Whenever compassion triumphs over cruelty, the armies of Shambhala march unseen. Whenever wisdom pierces ignorance, another gate opens. The hidden kingdom, they say, is always one act of clarity away. And so Shambhala endures, half in the clouds of myth, half in the hearts of those who believe. The ancient mountains still guard their secrets, and the winds that sweep across the Tibetan plateau still carry the rumor of a shining realm beyond the snow. Whether it lies in some uncharted valley or only within the luminous depths of consciousness, Shambhala continues to beckon humanity with its quiet promise that there exists, somewhere beyond the noise of the world, a place where wisdom reigns, where the Dharma is alive, and where the dream of peace is not illusion, but truth. Long before the word Shambhala shimmered in the thin air of the Himalayas, its essence was already stirring in the imagination of ancient India. The idea of a sacred realm, hidden, pure, and enduring, had deep roots in the Indian mind. Across the plains of the Ganges and the arid plateaus of Gandhara, the sages spoke of lands where virtue never waned, where the cosmic order remained unbroken, though the world outside decayed. These were Uttara Kurus, the northern paradises, places beyond ordinary reach, but close to the axis of the gods. They appeared in the Vedic hymns and in the epics as luminous reminders that righteousness and beauty, though exiled from the earth, were not lost forever. From this visionary geography, Shambhala would one day be born. The early Indians saw the world not as a sphere of matter, but as a living mandala, a circle of mountains and oceans, of heavens and hells, each reflecting an aspect of consciousness. At the center of this cosmic design stood Mount Meru, the pillar of creation, encircled by continents of mythic proportion. Beyond them, in the pure lands of the north, the gods and sages dwelled in bliss. These regions were not charted by caravans, but by meditation. They symbolized states of mind, levels of purity, as much as geographical domains. To speak of the north was to speak of transcendence. To journey there was to ascend inwardly toward enlightenment. Within this sacred cosmology, the notion of a hidden, enlightened realm provided both a metaphysical and moral function. The world of men, governed by desire and decay, was transient. But somewhere beyond, there existed a realm where the cosmic law, Dharma, was preserved in its pristine form. It was to this realm that heroes aspired, and from it that spiritual renewal would one day return. Thus, even before the rise of Buddhism, India had imagined its paradises, bright sanctuaries where the eternal flame of wisdom was kept alight, while the rest of the world drifted into shadow. When the Buddha appeared in the 6th century BCE, he entered this already myth-laden world, yet transformed its meaning. His teaching turned the gaze inward. The path to liberation lay not across mountains or oceans, but through the stilling of the mind. In this reorientation, the geography of the sacred began to change. The mountains and paradises did not vanish. They became metaphors for interior states. To climb Meru was to ascend through levels of consciousness. To reach the Pure Land was to awaken compassion within. In the Kalachakra teachings, the boundaries between physical and spiritual geography blur. Shambhala occupies both the outer world and the inner mind. The outer Shambhala may be hidden in the far north, but the inner Shambhala lies latent in every being, a potential for enlightenment waiting to be uncovered. Just as a mirror reflects light when its dust is wiped away, so the heart reveals Shambhala when ignorance is cleared. The kingdom is thus both myth and method, a way to speak of the perfection that is already present beneath the imperfections of the visible world. The Kalachakra Tantra itself reinforces this duality. It describes 3 levels of reality: the outer, inner, and other, or Adhyatma. The outer refers to the physical world, its cycles of time and planetary motion. The inner corresponds to the body's own rhythms, breath, energy, and consciousness. And the other denotes the ultimate reality, the unchanging awareness that underlies all phenomena. To understand the outer is to comprehend the inner. To master both is to awaken to the other. Thus, the practice of Kalachakra unites cosmology, physiology, and metaphysics. It is a science of interdependence, a vision of the universe as a single living mandala. In this context, Shambhala is more than myth. It is the archetype of enlightened society, the external expression of the internal realization achieved through Kalachakra practice. Just as the adept's body becomes a mandala of balanced energies, so the land of Shambhala manifests as a mandala of perfect governance, art, and virtue. The king represents the mind's sovereignty, the ministers, its faculties, the citizens, its thoughts. To purify the realm is to purify the mind. To rule wisely is to awaken. The Kalachakra Tantra thus presents Shambhala as the living proof that enlightenment can inform the collective. That the Dharma is not only a path for monks, but the foundation of civilization itself. This vision reflected, in subtle form, a larger historical transformation in Indian Buddhism. The early centuries of the first millennium had witnessed the rise of powerful Buddhist monarchies, from Ashoka's Mauryan Empire to the later Pala dynasty of Bengal, where kings patronized monasteries and scholars served as royal advisors. The idea that a ruler could embody the Dharma, governing through compassion and wisdom, became a central political ideal. Shambhala elevated that concept to its mythic perfection. A realm where every citizen was a practitioner, every ruler an enlightened guide. At the same time, the Kalachakra's cosmological reach gave Shambhala a distinctly apocalyptic dimension. The text prophesies that the world will descend into chaos, moral corruption, greed, and warfare, until the final king, Raudra Chakrin, arises to restore balance. This is no mere prophecy of destruction, but of renewal. The cycle of decline and restoration mirrors the turning of the cosmic wheel itself. Time, in the Kalachakra, is not linear, but cyclical. History moves like breath, inhalation and exhalation, expansion and return. Shambhala is the moment of exhalation, when the world, having wandered into darkness, breathes light once more. The myth, thus, serves both as warning and promise. It assures that the Dharma will endure, even when forgotten by the world. It also introduces a profound metaphysical insight, that the ultimate kingdom is not located at a point in time, but in the eternal present. The still axis around which the wheel turns. Those who awaken to that axis through the practice of Kalachakra enter Shambhala even now. In the Indian imagination, this understanding dissolved the barrier between history and eternity. Between myth and meditation, Shambhala became the timeless refuge within time itself. As the centuries turned and the monasteries of northern India fell to the changing tides of empire and invasion, the spiritual seeds carried in the Kalachakra Tantra began to scatter toward the Himalayas. The physical kingdom of Shambhala may never have been mapped, but the idea of it was carried by monks, traders, and mystics, a current of luminous doctrine flowing northward into Tibet. The great mountain barrier that had once divided India from its mysterious neighbor now became a bridge between worlds, where myth and geography intertwined. Tibet, when the teachings of the Kalachakra arrived, was itself a land half-rooted in myth. The air was thin, the stars closer, and the mountains vast enough to harbor whole realms of the unseen. The Tibetans, inheritors of both shamanic tradition and the later flowering of Buddhism, were primed to receive the idea of a hidden kingdom. In their cosmology, the earth was alive with sacred energy. Its cliffs inhabited by deities, its valleys veiled sanctuaries known as Bayul, revealed only to the pure of heart. The legend of Shambhala resonated deeply with this worldview. It was not imported as a foreign myth, but recognized as something long intimated in their own landscape. The invisible paradise beyond the snows. The earliest Tibetan translations of the Kalachakra Tantra appeared around the 11th century. during what Tibetan historians call the later diffusion of the Dharma. This was an era of revival and reconstruction. The empire that had once unified Tibet had collapsed. The old Buddhist institutions were shattered, and the faith was being reintroduced from India with new vigor and complexity. The Kala Chakra, with its vast cosmology and intricate symbolism, arrived as both revelation and challenge, a teaching so comprehensive that it seemed to contain all others. It offered not only meditation and philosophy, but astronomy, medicine, and social order, a total vision of reality. To the Tibetans, who sought to rebuild both their spiritual and political identity, Shambhala became more than myth. It became a model of civilization. The concept of an enlightened kingdom ruled by wise monarchs, where dharma and governance were one, mirrored their own aspiration for unity and moral leadership. In the figure of the Kalki king, the Tibetans saw the archetype of the Dharma ruler, the Chose Riyal, the sovereign who rules through compassion, wisdom, and ritual authority. Thus, Shambhala was not merely studied, it was invoked as a mirror for earthly kingship. The idea took on a dual life, as a mystical realm beyond reach and as an ethical ideal toward which human society might strive. As monasteries rose again in central Tibet, the Kala Chakra became one of the crown jewels of esoteric practice. The great scholar Dro Lotsawa brought the teachings from India around 1027 CE, a date that, in Tibetan tradition, marks the beginning of the Kala Chakra era. This year became the cornerstone of Tibetan calendrical science, a subtle sign that the rhythms of Shambhala had entered the very reckoning of Tibetan time. To keep the calendar was to keep the pulse of the hidden kingdom alive. In its Tibetan form, the Kala Chakra Tantra was both more accessible and more mysterious. The translators rendered its dense Sanskrit into the rhythm of Tibetan verse, but the essence remained deeply esoteric. The text's cosmological dimensions, its maps of the cosmos, the subtle body, and the cycles of history, were embraced by learned lamas and astrologers alike. But the stories of Shambhala, its kings and prophecies, entered popular imagination. They spread in chants, murals, and oral tales, until the very name De Shambhala, the Tibetan rendering, became synonymous with hope. To Tibetan minds, the north, the direction of Shambhala, was the axis of purity and revelation. The land was said to lie beyond the great mountain ranges, behind the desert of sand and mirage known as Tangyul. Those who traveled that way might encounter luminous beings or vanish into thin air. Pilgrims told of valleys that opened and closed like the petals of a flower, admitting only the worthy. Some said that the way to Shambhala could be found not by compass, but by spiritual transformation. When the pilgrim's mind became still as a lake, the mirage dissolved, and the true road appeared. It is not hidden by mountains, the lamas would say, but by our delusion. The teachings of Shambhala came to express this union of inner and outer. While the Indian texts had hinted that the kingdom was both real and symbolic, the Tibetan masters elaborated this in their own idiom. They taught that Shambhala exists simultaneously in three dimensions: the outer Shambhala, a physical land hidden from ordinary perception; the inner Shambhala, the subtle mandala within the practitioner's body and mind; and the secret Shambhala, the ultimate realm of pure awareness, beyond all form. To enter the outer land, one must first discover the inner. And to know the inner, one must awaken to the secret. Thus, the geography of Shambhala became inseparable from the geography of enlightenment. The Tibetan commentaries also expanded the lineage of Shambhala kings, treating them not as mythical figures, but as exemplars of perfect rule. The 7 Dharmarajas and 25 Kalkis were said to have preserved the Kalachakra teachings through the ages, ensuring that they would be revealed to humanity in times of decline. Their reigns were interpreted as cycles of spiritual renewal. Each king symbolized a quality of mind: clarity, compassion, discernment, discipline, fearlessness. To contemplate their succession was to contemplate the stages of awakening itself. This esoteric symbolism coexisted with an eschatological vision. The Kalachakra Tantra had foretold that at the end of the age, when greed and ignorance engulf the world, the final Kalki will arise from Shambhala, leading an army of the virtuous to restore the Dharma. Tibetan prophets interpreted this not merely as a cosmic drama, but as a recurring pattern in history. The eternal struggle between wisdom and delusion, light and shadow. In this sense, Shambhala became Tibet's eschatological compass, orienting the faithful toward a future redemption, both mystical and moral. Yet Shambhala also became a political myth. From the 12th century onward, Tibetan rulers and monastic lineages began to associate their own legitimacy with the ideal of the Shambhalan king. The Cho's Rugyal was to rule as the Rigden rules, justly, wisely, and in service to the Dharma. Some chronicles even claim descent, literal or spiritual, from the Shambhala lineage. In times of invasion or civil strife, prophecies of Shambhala's return offered comfort. The world might fall into shadow, but the hidden kingdom endured, its armies ready to ride forth when the time was ripe. By the 13th century, the Mongol Empire's expansion brought new layers to this mythic vision. The Mongols, with their own belief in heavenly kingship and sacred mountains, found resonance in the legend of Shambhala. When the Sakya hierarchs became spiritual advisors to Kublai Khan, they wove the imagery of the Kalachakra into imperial rituals, presenting the Great Khan as a temporal reflection of the Rigden. Thus, Shambhala crossed yet another boundary, from meditative ideal to geopolitical symbol. It came to embody the dream of a world united under enlightened rule, where spiritual insight and worldly power converged in harmony. Even as the physical centers of Indian Buddhism faded, monasteries burned, texts scattered, the vision of Shambhala remained unbroken, preserved in the Tibetan highlands like a jewel hidden in snow. Its myth became the seed of continuity, assuring the Tibetans that the heart of the Dharma, though driven from its homeland, was not lost. Indeed, it had only retreated to the higher realms, awaiting its time to descend once more. In this sense, Shambhala was both inheritance and prophecy, the bridge between India's vanishing enlightenment and Tibet's rising spiritual empire. Over time, this idea shaped not only Tibet's spirituality, but its sense of destiny. The Dalai Lamas, the Panchen Lamas, and the Great Turtons all spoke in different ways of the hidden kingdom as both refugee and source of renewal. When the world entered periods of degeneration, foreign invasions, famines, moral decay, the thought of Shambhala sustained faith. To meditate on its existence was to align oneself with its timeless current. To remember that wisdom had a home even when the world seemed forsaken. In the long arc from India to Tibet, Shambhala thus evolved from a mythic kingdom into a metaphysical principle, the assurance that enlightenment and society, spirit and governance could coexist. It was the outer mirror of the inner path, the realm that reflected humanity's highest potential. In the Tibetan imagination, this kingdom still glows beyond the rim of the known world, untouched by time's decay. And though its gates remain hidden, its vision continues to pulse through history. A quiet reminder that beyond the shifting empires and the noise of the age, there abides a land where compassion rules, and the Dharma is forever alive. In the heart of Buddhist cosmology, where time itself is treated as a mandala, the Kalachakra Tantra stands as one of the most profound and enigmatic revelations. To study it is to peer into the architecture of the cosmos, not as an astronomer maps stars, but as a mystic traces the contours of awakening through the folds of reality. Within this intricate teaching, Shambhala is not an ornament or distant utopia. It is the living embodiment of the Tantra's vision, the manifestation of a world aligned with the universal rhythm of the wheel of time. The Kalachakra Tantra is said to have been spoken by the Buddha in his 41st year, a time when the world was still echoing with the first generations of his followers. But this was not the Buddha of the Deer Park or the Bamboo Grove, preaching renunciation to monks. It was a tantric Buddha, majestic and radiantly crowned, seated upon a lotus throne surrounded by deities of light. At Danyakataka, near Amaravat, in southern India, he manifested this transcendent form to reveal a teaching suited for an age of turmoil, a dharma not of withdrawal, but of engagement with time itself. The audience was not limited to mendicant monks. Among them sat King Suchandra of Shambhala, a ruler who sought liberation without forsaking his kingdom. Suchandra, according to the Kalachakra Chronicles, had contemplated the Buddha's earlier teachings but found no path that reconciled the responsibilities of kingship with the quest for enlightenment. How, he asked, may a man govern the world without becoming bound to it? How may one act without attachment, rule without pride, protect without violence? The Buddha, perceiving his sincerity, manifested a great golden mandala, an image of the universe itself, and taught the Kalachakra Tantra, the wheel of time. This was the teaching for those who must live within the world's movement, not apart from it. It was the doctrine of the dynamic Dharma, not the still pond of nirvana, but the flowing river of existence understood as sacred. To master the wheel of time was to perceive that time itself, with its seasons, births, and deaths, is the unfolding of wisdom. There is no need to flee the cycles. One must learn their rhythm and turn with them consciously. Thus, the Kalachakra is often called the Tantra of integration, for it reconciles what earlier teachings had held apart: the spiritual and the worldly, the meditative and the active, the monk and the king. Suchandra received the full transmission, together with 100,000 verses of instruction, which he carried back to his northern kingdom of Shambhala. There he transcribed the Tantra in the language of his realm and built a vast temple to enshrine it. The texts say that this temple, shaped as a three-dimensional mandala, reflected the cosmic order in its very architecture. 4 gates aligned with the directions, inner sanctums representing the chakras of the subtle body, and a central tower symbolizing the unchanging mind. Around it, the city of Kalapa took form, planned according to sacred geometry, so that every street and courtyard mirrored a principle of the teaching. Thus was born the kingdom of Shambhala as mandala. Not a random land, but a deliberate spiritual design, an entire civilization constructed in harmony with cosmic law. To dwell there was to live within the mandala of the universe itself. Every action, from the turning of the plow to the ringing of temple bells, was a motion of the great wheel. Time was no longer an enemy, but a teacher, the rhythm of awakening echoing through all things. The Kalachakra Tantra divides its vast teaching into 5 chapters, each corresponding to a dimension of reality. The first is the outer Kala Chakra, describing the physical cosmos, its planets, elements, and cycles of time. The second, the inner Kala Chakra, reveals the microcosm of the human body, with its channels, energies, and subtle winds, or prana. The third, the other Kala Chakra, unveils the path of meditation that unites the outer and inner, transforming both into the expression of enlightened mind. The remaining 2 chapters concern initiation and realization, the methods by which the practitioner enters the mandala and awakens to the timeless state beyond time. Through this intricate synthesis, the Kala Chakra presents a vision of the universe as a mirror of the self. The movement of the planets corresponds to the circulation of the breath. The passing of eons reflects the flicker of thought. To comprehend one is to comprehend the other. The sage who perceives this correspondence transcends both. He becomes the Kala Chakra, the wheel of time itself, turning yet unmoved. This insight underlies the spiritual ethos of Shambhala, that the perfected being does not withdraw from the world, but stands at its still center, governing with serene awareness as time flows around him like a river around a stone. The cosmology described in the Kala Chakra Tantra is vast and complex. Time is measured not only in human generations, but in great cycles, or kalpas, spanning billions of years. Within each cycle, worlds arise, flourish, decay, and are renewed, mirroring the breath of the cosmic body. The Tantra divides these into 4 ages: the golden, silver, bronze, and iron, each marked by the gradual decline of virtue. Humanity, it says, now dwells in the Iron Age, the age of moral exhaustion and spiritual forgetfulness. Yet even here, the Kala Chakra offers solace. Within the deepest darkness, the seeds of renewal germinate. Shambhala, hidden beyond the known world, preserves the Dharma until the wheel turns again toward light. The outer Kala Chakra describes the universe as a vast mandala of elements, with Mount Meru at its center, the cosmic axis, surrounded by concentric continents and oceans. At the outermost ring lies the land of Shambhala, encircled by a wall of snow peaks that gleam like crystal in the perpetual dawn. Its climate is temperate, its rivers pure, its vegetation abundant. The very air, it is said, is infused with prana, sustaining long life and clarity of mind. This geography is not meant to be charted, but to be contemplated. Each mountain and river corresponds to an aspect of the inner body, each direction to a virtue of consciousness. The land is the body of wisdom itself. While the outer Shambhala describes the visible kingdom of mountains and rivers, the Kala Chakra Tantra teaches that this realm mirrors a subtler reality, the inner Shambhala. Within each practitioner flows a universe in miniature. The channels, or nadas, carry prana, the vital winds of consciousness. The chakras reflect continents, the heart is Mount Meru, and the radiant mind mirrors the endless sky. By aligning the microcosm of the body with the macrocosm of the cosmos, the seeker harmonizes with the rhythm of the wheel of time. Beyond the inner realm lies the secret Shambhala, the ultimate dimension of pure awareness. It is formless, beyond duality, yet inseparable from the outer and inner. To enter the physical kingdom of Shambhala, one must first awaken the inner. To know the inner, one must perceive the secret. In this way, the geography of Shambhala becomes inseparable from the geography of enlightenment itself, a map both of the mind and of the cosmos. The Tibetan commentaries expanded the lineage of Shambhala kings, not as myth, but as exemplars of perfect rule. The 7 Dharmarajas and 25 Kalki kings were said to preserve the Kala Chakra teachings through the ages. ensuring they would be revealed when the world declined. Each king embodied qualities of mind: clarity, compassion, discernment, discipline, fearlessness. To contemplate their succession was to contemplate the stages of awakening itself. Yet Shambhala also contains an eschatological vision. The Kala Chakra Tantra foretells that when greed and ignorance engulf the world, the final Kalki will arise. Rudra Chakran, the wrathful wheel-turner. From the palace of Kalapa, he will lead an army of radiant warriors, banners shining like the northern lights, weapons of wisdom cutting through the darkness of delusion. This is not the apocalypse of destruction, but a cosmic renewal, a reawakening of Dharma in the cycles of time. The prophecy speaks less of external salvation than of inner renewal. Shambhala is not merely a distant kingdom to be found with the body, but a state of awakening to be cultivated within. The battle is the struggle between clarity and confusion in the hearts of humanity, and the victory of the Kalki is the triumph of awareness itself. When the wheel of time turns anew, the golden age returns, not by conquest, but through the awakening of mind and society. Through this synthesis of myth and meditation, the Kala Chakra Tantra transforms the very notion of history. Time is not linear, but cyclical. Every decline is the prelude to rebirth. In Shambhala, history is a mandala in motion, epochs turning like petals around a still center. The kings embody this wisdom, guiding both the outer world and the inner path. To remember Shambhala is to remember that beneath the flux of empires and ages, the wheel continues to turn, and at its center, awareness never moves. When the teachings of the Kala Chakra Tantra crossed the Himalayan threshold and entered Tibet, they encountered a culture uniquely prepared to receive them. The Tibetan imagination, steeped in mountain myths, visionary geography, and an unbroken reverence for sacred kingship, offered fertile ground for the legend of Shambhala to take root and flourish. What had begun in India as an esoteric revelation for a king became, in Tibet, the mythic heart of a civilization, resonating through art, ritual, and the very conception of history. By the 12th century, Tibet was a land suspended between heaven and earth. The peaks rose like frozen prayers. The high plateaus shimmered with mirage and light. In such a landscape, the distinction between myth and geography was porous. Every valley was believed to conceal a Baal, a hidden sanctuary accessible only to the pure of heart. The Himalayas themselves were the ribs of a living cosmos, breathing with deities, spirits, and guardians. Within this worldview, the story of Shambhala did not appear foreign. It appeared remembered. It felt like a truth already known, now given name and scripture. The Kala Chakra Tantra entered Tibet during a period of intense religious revival, known as the later diffusion of Buddhism. The ancient empire had fallen centuries earlier, and the land was divided among regional lords. Amid this fragmentation, spiritual masters sought new sources of authority, not only textual, but cosmic. The Kala Chakra, with its vast cosmology and prophecy of an enlightened kingdom, offered precisely that. Its myth of a hidden realm preserved by pure kings spoke to a people yearning for moral order and unity. The Tibetans recognized in Shambhala a mythic archetype for their own ideal of sacred kingship. The Chose Regyal, the Dharma king, who rules not by force, but by virtue. As the Kala Chakra teaching spread through Tibet's monastic universities, the myth of Shambhala began to radiate outward into every facet of culture. The earliest depictions appear in Thangka paintings from the 12th and 13th centuries, where the kingdom is rendered as a mandala, concentric rings of palaces gardens, and mountains surrounding the radiant city of Kalapa. These paintings are not landscapes, but cosmograms, diagrams of the enlightened world. At the center sits the palace of the Kalki kings, often represented as a lotus tower floating in light. Around it unfold 12 provinces, each corresponding to a zodiacal sign. And beyond them, the encircling wall of snow peaks that shields the kingdom from profane eyes. To gaze upon such a thangka was not to look at art, but to enter a vision. The viewer, guided by the teacher's commentary, was invited to contemplate the image as a reflection of their own inner mandala. To recognize that the luminous towers of Shambhala are built within the mind. Pilgrims who could not cross mountains could still journey inward, tracing the concentric rings of the painting as stages of meditation. To visualize Shambhala was to move through time toward timelessness, through the world toward its hidden center. Yet for the Tibetans, the myth retained a subtle ambiguity. Was Shambhala a real place hidden beyond the Himalayas? A physical kingdom accessible to those of pure karma? Or was it a visionary realm within consciousness? The answer, characteristically, was both. The great scholar Bhutan Rinchen Drup wrote that those with ordinary eyes see mountains, those with pure vision see Shambhala. The distinction between outer and inner Shambhala mirrored the Buddhist distinction between form and emptiness. Both real, both inseparable. The Kala Chakra initiation itself, one of the most elaborate rituals in Tibetan Buddhism, served as the living reenactment of Shambhala's founding. The ceremony begins with the construction of a vast mandala of colored sand, depicting the palace of Kalapa in exquisite detail. Monks spend days or weeks pouring the sand through metal funnels, creating rivers, gates, towers, and deities. The architecture of enlightenment rendered in mineral dust. When complete, the mandala becomes the threshold between worlds. The initiates, guided by the Lama, are led through its gates in meditation, symbolically entering Shambhala and receiving the empowerment of its kings. This ritual embodies a profound principle of Tibetan spirituality. That myth can be enacted. The mandala is not a symbol pointing elsewhere. It is the presence of Shambhala itself. The moment of initiation collapses the distance between the historical, the mythical, and the mystical. The participant becomes both pilgrim and king, entering the timeless kingdom within. When the ritual concludes, the mandala is swept away, its sands carried to the river, a reminder that all forms, even the most sacred, are transient, and that the true Shambhala is not in the sand, but in the mind that perceives it. As centuries passed, Shambhala ceased to be merely a myth of origin or a model of kingship. It became the great horizon of Tibetan spirituality, a hidden axis around which imagination, devotion, and destiny revolved. To speak of Shambhala in Tibet was to evoke not only geography, but revelation, not only hope, but prophecy. Its image shimmered in the collective consciousness like a mirage of perfection. Sometimes near, sometimes distant, always luminous. The motif of the hidden land, the Bayul, became deeply intertwined with the idea of Shambhala. Great tertons, or treasure revealers, described entire valleys sealed by divine power to serve as sanctuaries in times of decline. These hidden realms, nestled in the folds of the Himalayas, were regarded as earthly reflections of the ultimate Shambhala. When the world darkened and faith waned, the faithful could retreat into these sanctuaries, where the Dharma would flourish unseen. In this way, Shambhala served as the archetype of refuge, a citadel of purity mirroring the mind's potential for transcendence. Many Tibetan yogins and wanderers claim to have glimpsed this realm. They tell of wandering northward through deserts and mountain passes where the wind whispered mantras, reaching the threshold of a radiant plain ringed by snow peaks, entering a city whose streets shone like moonlight. Others were turned back by guardians, informed that their karma was not yet ripe. These accounts, visionary, allegorical, or both, testify to Shambhala's psychological reality. A destination of the soul as much as of the body, accessible only through the purification of perception. The literary imagination of Tibet wove these visions into poetry and prophecy. Texts like the Shambhala Layi Lam describe the journey as both an outer pilgrimage and an inner transformation. The traveler must pass through 8 great trials, each reflecting a defilement of mind, desire, anger, ignorance, pride, doubt, laziness, distraction, and fear. Only by mastering these inner demons can one perceive the subtle gate opening into the northern land. Thus, the geography of Shambhala becomes an allegory of the spiritual path. Each step northward mirrors a step inward toward the still heart of awareness. Artists found in Shambhala a limitless canvas. Thangkas depicting the Kala Chakra mandala became visual symphonies of cosmic order. Deep blue, gold, and crimson represented the transformation of the 5 elements and the 5 poisons into wisdom. The mandala's architecture, meticulously measured, instructed not only in proportion and harmony, but in the subtle mathematics of enlightenment. To paint it was a meditation, to contemplate it, an initiation. The painter became a constructor of the invisible, participating in the continual recreation of the sacred world. Shambhala's vision also shaped the very conception of kingship. The ideal of the Dharmaraja, the ruler who governs according to Dharma, became inseparable from the vision of the Kalki kings. Temporal authority was justified not by lineage or conquest, but by spiritual realization. The ruler became the axis of the realm, as the Rigden is the axis of the mandala. The 5th Dalai Lama, who unified Tibet under the Ganden Phodrang government, explicitly drew upon the imagery of Shambhala. In coronation texts and rituals, he identified his rule with the cosmic sovereignty of the Kalkis, presenting governance as the earthly continuation of Shambhala's enlightened order. To govern was to sustain the mandala of the world. To enact law was to turn the wheel of time. In architecture, this synthesis reached sublime expression. The Potala Palace was conceived not merely as a fortress or residence, but as a terrestrial mandala, mirroring Kalapa itself. Its 13 stories symbolize the stages of the Bodhisattva path. Its golden roofs radiate the crown of the Rigden. From its summit, the Dalai Lama presided as spiritual guide and temporal ruler, the still center of Tibet's turning wheel. Within its chapels, murals of Shambhala adorn the walls. Golden landscapes of serene mountains, celestial palaces, and Kalki kings in meditation beneath skies of turquoise light. Through these images, Tibetans perceived their own history as part of Shambhala's greater cycle. When prosperity reigned, the energies of Shambhala were thought to flow freely into the world. When wars or famine struck, the connection was said to have dimmed. Yet the myth endured, a promise that beyond the visible realm, the kingdom of wisdom remained intact, waiting to re-emerge when humanity was ready. Shambhala was the eternal refuge of hope, assuring that even as empires fall, the mandala of enlightenment never perishes. Even as Shambhala flourished in myth, art, and ritual, The Kala Chakra Tantra spoke of time's inevitable turning. Though the kingdom embodies perfection, cycles of decline cannot be denied. The texts foretell an age of darkness when greed, ignorance, and moral decay will sweep across the world. It is in this iron age that the final Kalki, Rudra Chakran, the wrathful wheel turner, will rise. He will descend from Kalapa with an army of luminous warriors, each bearing weapons of wisdom rather than steel. Their banners shine like the northern lights, their steeds ride on the wind. They will confront the forces of chaos and ignorance, not to annihilate, but to awaken. In this final struggle, falsehood collapses under the weight of its own delusion, and the Dharma dawns anew. This is not apocalypse in the Western sense. It is the renewal of time's cycle. The victory of Rudra Chakran is the victory of awareness, the triumph of clarity over confusion, of insight over blindness. Scholars have long debated the origins and meaning of this prophecy. Some see it as a symbolic response to India's historical turbulence, recast in cosmic terms. Others interpret it as a universal archetype, the expectation of a savior restoring harmony in times of chaos, akin to Vishnu's avatars or messianic hopes elsewhere. Yet the Kala Chakra places salvation not in a single figure, but in the collective awakening of humanity. Shambhala is less a distant deliverer than a call to inner renewal, reminding each generation that the struggle between light and darkness is fought in the human heart. Through this synthesis of myth and meditation, the Kala Chakra Tantra transforms the very conception of history. Time is not linear, but cyclical. Every decline is a prelude to rebirth. In Shambhala, history is a mandala in motion, epochs turning like petals around a still center. The kings do not simply rule, they embody the wisdom of time itself. Each era, each revolution, is the eternal revealed through the transient. To remember Shambhala is to remember that beneath the flux of empires, awareness remains unmoved at the heart of the wheel of time. Thus, the founding of Shambhala stands as both myth and mirror, a story of a kingdom beyond the mountains, and a metaphor for the enlightened society that can arise within the heart. Awakening is not only individual, but collective. Whether the gates of Kalapa open in the outer world or within the luminous depths of the mind, the path leads inward, through the labyrinth of time, toward the stillness at its core, where the wheel of time turns and Shambhala abides forever. And so, the legend of Shambhala endures, not merely as a tale of hidden mountains or mystical kings, but as a living vision of what humanity might become. It reminds us that enlightenment is not distant, nor confined to monasteries or distant lands. It dwells within the heart, in the rhythm of awareness, in the harmony of our actions, and in the care we take to align ourselves with the Dharma. The wheel of time continues to turn. Civilizations rise and fall, empires fade, yet the seed of wisdom remains, hidden perhaps, but never lost. Shambhala is both promise and mirror, a call to awaken, to cultivate compassion, to live with clarity and courage, and to see the sacred in every moment of existence. So, whether in meditation, in study, or in the simple acts of daily life, one may glimpse the Northern Kingdom, its gates invisible, yet always open to those who seek truth. The legend endures, the teachings endure, and through them, the possibility of Shambhala lives on, timeless, luminous, and eternal. Until we meet again, may your path be guided by clarity, your heart by compassion, and your mind by the turning of the wheel of time.